All right, welcome everybody. This is Chief Meteorologist and Climate Specialist Jeff Berardelli here on WFLA Now, and we are looking at the U.S. House of Representatives. Across from me, you can see, of course, the guy that you know very well, JB. And we are going to be talking about this, what is a historic climate bill, really the first true climate bill that is likely to come out of Congress and be signed sometime very soon by President Joe Biden. And to help me through this and to answer our questions is a guy that's worked in this field for a very long time and who is actually, people always say that they're a good friend of someone else when they interview them, but this guy actually is a very good friend of mine. This is Jeff Nesbit. He's the founder of Climate Nexus. And you've been involved in this space for a very, very long time. And you've felt the emotional highs, and there have been very few, and a lot of emotional lows over the course of what has been a very long time that we have been trying to get climate legislation passed. And it literally seconds or hours away from passing.
You're absolutely correct. There's only been one true high, really big high, and that was the Paris Climate Agreement in 2015. There have been a lot of lows that go way back in time. The collapse of the BTU tax, which we can talk about way back when, the failure of the cap and trade, the Waxman-Markey cap and trade bill, the climate
Under Obama, right?
Under Obama, the climate science debacle. I've been there for all of it. It's going back decades. And I cannot tell you how excited I am right now that we're finally seeing this bill cross the finish line. It is historic. It's powerful. It's immense. It's truly interesting. It's going to supercharge the clean energy industry.
Now, the guy you're looking at, Jeff Nesbit, is, for the folks that are watching, you've been essentially in the trenches on this type of work for a very long time. So you know how the sauce is made. You understand where things get kind of stopped in their tracks. Let me ask you this. When Manchin walked away from this deal a while back, did you think that was it? It was dead. It wasn't going to happen. Or did you have hope that it would still somehow happen, before the possibility that Republicans take the House back, in November?
Well, I will have to say I was hopeless until I heard that, in fact, there were live talks going on that nobody really knew about. Right. So,
looks like we lost you for a second, Jeff. Okay, you're back.
I'm back. That Joe Manchin was actually serious in his discussions with Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, and several others, and that there were actual discussions. So I never gave up hope that this was going to cross the finish line.
I did. I have to say, maybe I'm a fatalist, but I kind of gave up a little bit of hope. I really didn't think it was going to happen.
Well, I did. In fact, so I have to say I wasn't all that surprised when the deal emerged, because I knew that there were discussions underway and that they were looking at this. And Manchin's staff never gave up on this. They continued to take discussions. They continued to be hopeful, and there were discussions out of the White House. But what really had to happen is exactly what happened, which is Chuck Schumer and Joe Manchin dealt with each other, staff to staff, cut out everybody else, all the distractions, and got the parameters of this thing hammered out. And it's not just, by the way, it's not just climate change. There are other amazing things in this bill. I mean, the two big ticket items that are going to be takeaways for people who go into the midterms are, this is going to lower health costs and it's going to lower energy costs.
Right, which people both...
Those two things are big deals.
Right, people especially care about energy right now, but they always care about healthcare. So, JB, if you can bring up my weather computer, because I have a graphic here from 1988, when James Hansen delivered that famous speech to Congress and said humans were unwittingly warming the globe. Now, we've known this since really the 1960s under the Johnson administration, right? It's been a long time that scientists have known that we've been warming the Earth. And after that stark headline, I think a lot of people expected that the United States would move. And there was a time that presidents and the Congress agreed that we should move in this direction, but it got stuck in politics somewhere along the way. And here we are 34 years later, and finally it has happened with an evenly divided Senate. It almost didn't happen. But it's amazing to me how far this legislation will actually take us to accomplish the goals that we need to accomplish. This is no small potatoes, right? I want you to, there are some environmentalists who are upset because there are some fossil fuel provisions in the bill. But most people agree that this is a huge, huge deal. Not a small one, not a medium-sized one, but a huge one. But let me let you weigh in on basically what I just said.
Well, a couple of things first. And I'm going to get to yes, it is a huge deal. It touches every single aspect of the clean energy economy, from energy efficiency in buildings to public transit to electric vehicles to utility, clean energy, you name it in the clean energy space, to create competition and lower costs. This bill is going to touch, this new law is going to touch that. But I want to actually go back in time, if you don't mind, because I've been involved in the tobacco wars. It was my crazy idea once upon a time for the FDA to regulate the tobacco industry, which is now the law of the land. It took, similar to this, it took 20 years before it became the law of the land and teenage smoking rates reduced. There is knowing something is true, and then for everybody else to finally understand that something is true. So in the tobacco wars for 20, 30 years, the industry fought like crazy to make sure that people were confused about whether smoking cigarettes caused lung cancer. It took forever.
Which, by the way, is exactly what happened in climate denial circles, where they were confusing people as to whether or not humans were warming the climate. And they're still doing it, by the way.
Yes, and that's the direct analogy. So confusing people about what we know, the science, that is a tried and true method for slowing down action.
And hundreds of billions of dollars is being spent on it. Hundreds of billions of dollars to essentially confuse the public so they don't know whether or not it's really important to regulate cigarettes or, in fact, figure out how to combat climate change. Yeah.
And that's why over the last 25, 30 years, you've seen this failure. You saw a failure to ratify the Kyoto International Climate Agreement, got stymied in the Senate because so much money got thrown at it. You saw a failure of the BTU tax, which was, one of Al Gore's subjects. You saw a failure of the cap and trade bill, which would have set a carbon price. You saw failure after failure because the entrenched interests were throwing so much money at stopping this. That's why what is happening today in this massive new historic bill becoming law, probably early next week, is amazing, because it finally crosses the finish line after so many attempts to cross the finish line on a big climate and energy bill. And again, this is why I'm so excited about this bill, and this new law is because it will energize and supercharge every single aspect of clean energy, clean tech. It will help make sure that the U.S. is a leader and can compete with China. And then it becomes a race to how quickly we can decarbonize the energy system across every single aspect.
So I have a graphic up there. The Blue-Green Alliance says that this could create as many as 9 million jobs in climate action, the Inflation Reduction Act, by, I think, 2030. So, and then I'm going to press this forward also so you can see this. Oh, wait, let me go backwards. Hold on a second. I messed that up because there was something else that I needed to show you. I see. Also, that the Rhodium Group says that we're going to reduce emissions probably by about 40%, which is just 10% under Joe Biden's goal of reducing emissions by 50% by 2030. So this is, in fact, about more than climate change. We're reducing emissions, so that's the climate change part. But the other part is jump-starting American manufacturing and making sure that China is not winning. And I want to bring up that graphic too, because for me, this is one of the biggest parts of what we need to do as a country. Right? China right now is investing more than double in clean energy type things than the United States is. We're way behind them. So we needed this steroids, this shot in the arm, so that we can catch up with China. We don't want all these parts made in China. We want them made here in the United States.
That's absolutely the case, especially when you look at some of the critical elements that go into other industry sectors like cell phones and supercomputers. China about 10, 15 years ago made its own big bet on the clean energy space. They started to race toward electric vehicles. They started to race toward the clean energy revolution. And it's taken this time for the US Congress and for Washington to catch up. And this new law, will allow the United States to start competing with China in that regard. And that's going to benefit the world. It's going to benefit the climate issue. It's going to benefit the world, but it's also going to benefit millions and millions of people who are going to get new jobs out of this. I mean, this is this is going to become one of the leading industries of the 21st century. This is the beginning of that story. It's genuinely exciting in that regard.
Not to invoke the New Deal or the Green New Deal, but this is similar in that, in terms of an injection into what is an emerging industrial economy here in America that is going to reshape not only the economy in the future, but also a lot of this money and a lot of these jobs will end up in rural areas. And, you know, I had Dr. Leah Stokes, of course, you know Leah very well, on, and she was talking about how, yes, she is, and she had a hand in crafting at least some of the legislation here. That she mentioned that this is going to reshape the politics of it too, because there are going to be a lot of clean energy jobs in a lot of places that have been opposing climate action. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, it's going to do that. And there are actually two things going on here. There was an earlier bipartisan infrastructure bill that passed, and it sent tens of billions of dollars to the Department of Energy to transform American cities all across the country, in red states, purple states, blue states. And now this comes along, and it's going to do the same thing in all these other sectors. So you're going to see jump starts and more money and more jobs in every corner of America. That's brand new. Everybody's going to see this everywhere.
We need this because I think a lot of people feel like they're left behind. And we need this in places like coal country, in West Virginia, in Eastern Kentucky, where, you know, devastating floods just happened. I was there about a year ago, Jeff. I don't know if you remember, I did a story there, and I visited the towns, and there's a lot of pride in the fact that they helped build this nation with coal.
Yes.
And their grandfathers, their great-grandfathers, their fathers, and even though the industry is basically gone, I mean, it's not producing many jobs there anymore, they still hold on dearly to that because it is a part of who they are. It's a part of their identity. It's a part of their culture, but what they really need, and not there, but not just there, in many parts of the country, is jobs. They need money. They need reasons to stay there. So many of their young people are leaving those towns and moving to cities, and so a lot of these towns are hemorrhaging money, and they really need to create those jobs so that they can keep people close to home. And I think it's a trend that's been happening for decades in America, right?
Which is why, absolutely. So the fact that West Virginia senator was one of the principal architects of this, and the fact that there's so many aspects of this bill that's about to become law that are going to touch places like West Virginia, places like Wyoming, where coal has been historically pulled out of the Powder River Basin, other parts of the United States, combined with the fact that there's quite a bit of money that's going to allow communities to build up resilience to the impacts that we're already starting to see from climate change. You're going to see people are going to wake up in the not too distant future and see this is helping them everywhere, all across the country, and positioning the United States to be a world leader in the clean energy revolution, and make a dent in the climate problem that that everybody on Earth is facing. I honestly, people are going to be winning. It's a win-win-win-win scenario for lots of folks. That's not to say that there won't be a pretty concerted political effort by certain sectors working with certain politicians to try to diminish the impact of this.
Yeah,
we'll see that as well. But honestly, this touches, again, first of all, it's historic, first major climate bill ever in the history of the United States, and it's after 20, 30 years of failure on efforts to try to get a bill like this across. But more importantly, it genuinely is going to touch every sector of the energy and every community in America.
So, folks, if you're watching from home or wherever you are, you can ask us questions by doing #Jeff, right? JB, just hashtag Jeff and hashtag Jeff or hashtag Jeff. You have one choice. #Jeff is your choice. Or hashtag JB, and we'll be able to see the questions that you have, if you have any questions. Now, the reason why I have the oil derricks there in the picture is because, and those are oil derricks, am I correct in the terminology?
Yes.
So the one thing that's in the bill that a lot of environmentalists are not happy about is the fact that the U.S. government has to pair the offer of leases for drilling on public land for oil every time it approves. Is that right? Every time it approves a renewable energy project like wind or solar. So essentially giving both industries the opportunity to partake in this essentially energy revolution as we go forward. So should environmentalists, should those that are climate concerned, climate hawks, people that are interested, should they be concerned that about this provision for fossil fuel companies in the bill?
Well, of course they're going to be concerned, but here's what I would say to that. This was the cost of doing business for getting this bill across the finish line. This is what Joe Manchin insisted on. His vote was critical. His negotiating efforts were critical to this happening. So this was the cost of doing business. And quite honestly, you know, the energy transition is not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a bit of time. We all know that. I'll tell you what's really interesting to me is that you've got a number of the world leaders in oil and gas exploration who are already looking at the future. They're already looking at carbon dioxide removal efforts. They're already looking at, you know, building a business around CDR credits, which are in this bill, in this law. They're going to take advantage of those. And you could see a brand new business, just like they profited from pulling, you know, all of this oil and trapped carbon from the ground. They also may turn right around and become industry leaders.
And the government will help them fund that.
And the government will help them fund it and bury it back in those deposits and help the climate. So and at the end of the day, it's probably going to help them as well.
You know, I was out last weekend in St. Petersburg, which is not too far from Tampa here. And my wife and I we were in a parking garage, and there was a plug, you know, one of the, you know, charging, we have like a plug-in hybrid vehicle, and we wanted to charge our vehicle. And when I went up to charge it, and I went to download the app, it turns out that guess who bought the charging company? Shell. Shell bought the charging company. So, you know, they realize, a lot of these big fossil fuel companies, that if they want to be a part of the energy future, that they're going to need to move in this direction. And I will just say this, a big lesson was learned, you know, back, you know, when, you know, with steam engine trains and horse and buggy, is that people who owned horse and buggy companies they weren't in the horse and buggy company if they wanted to stay alive. They were in the transportation business, right? So that's essentially what these energy companies realize. They're not in the fossil fuel business if they want to survive in the future. They're in the energy business if they want to survive in the future. So you can see that they're starting to invest money in renewable energy as well. Yeah,
and the smart leadership at some of those companies know that. Yeah, absolutely, they know that, and they're going to position themselves to be, you know, energy companies, and you know, and they'll just be clean energy companies or carbon removal and clean energy companies. There's no question that's going to happen. You know, it's interesting, and both Google and the New York Times hate it when I talk about this story, but way back when, in the mid 1990s, when the World Wide Web was being formed and Google just had, you know, emerged from Stanford's, web servers to become, you know, what we now know as Google Inc. They went to the New York Times and said, you know, we're a startup. Would you like to own 25% of Google? And the response from the New York Times back then was, the World Wide Web, why are we worried about you? You're not a competitor to us.
Yeah, I know.
So people, it's natural for people to not quite understand the tremendous opportunity that's just over the horizon once you do something like this. But this bill is going to make that future possible now. We can now look over the horizon and see exactly what a 21st century clean energy revolution looks like, and this bill is going to actually jumpstart that.
So I just to play devil's advocate for a second, I love the idea that in this bill, that in order for car companies to qualify for these tax credits, that a lot of the parts need to be made in America. I love it. I think it's exactly what we need to do for long-term success, because it goes way beyond the climate. It goes into, you know, a successful American economy in the future. But there are a lot of people who are saying, well, it's going to take years. Very few cars, electric cars on the market would qualify for these tax rebates right now. So do you think that the car manufacturers are going to want these rebates and incentives so much that they are willing to start working on their supply chains here in America?
Not only will they, I've actually talked to the leadership of 4 of those car companies. They know exactly what this bill means to them, and they absolutely want to move in that direction. But yes, you're right, there will be a short-term problem, because I think it's like 80-90 different electric vehicle brands that currently qualify for tax credits. It's going to shrink down to 25 right after this becomes law. There's going to be a short-term problem, but I can guarantee it's not going to be years. It's going to be maybe even months.
So you feel like the car companies already understand this and they're working on their American supply chain, which is what we want to see, right? We want jobs created here in America.
Yes, and they're looking at building big plants in Georgia and Alabama and Michigan, and yes, they're looking at that future, and this provides that roadmap for that future.
Well, look at all the geopolitical problems that we have right now because we're reliant on fossil fuels from other countries. You know what I mean? And by the way, you tell me if I'm wrong here, but oil companies don't even want to drill that much because it depresses their stock price and they make less profits. So and am I wrong about that, or is that just
no?
Okay, all right. So the point is that we're stuck in the system that, no matter what we do, our gas prices are going to swing from $2 to $5, back to $2, back to $5. And every time there's some geopolitical issue, like right now, Russia, we are at the mercy of these politics and the supply and demand issues that surround it. Creating these jobs and these products in America. And by the way, electricity is, so this is another thing that I don't think people realize. But electric cars are like 80% efficient in terms of their usage of energy, whereas internal combustion cars are very, very fuel inefficient. A lot of that gets just released. It doesn't get used in actually powering the car. So not only is it cheaper to kind of fill up your car with electric than it is with gas, but you're not wasting so much energy because you're wasting so much more with internal combustion engines. I think people that have driven an electric car can really feel the difference. The power difference. And by the way, I think this is crazy, but a Ford F-150 Lightning can power a home for 3 days. So if your home were to lose power, you just plug your truck into the home.
It's a little mini power plant. Yeah,
it's crazy. It's crazy to me. So, but anyway, getting back to the geopolitics of it, do you think people really understand how this could change things if we can become energy independent and we don't have to rely on these commodities? The one commodity we still have to rely on, though, are these rare earth metals, which hopefully we can find here in America. But I'll let you elaborate.
And those rare earth metals are critical for other industries as well. Apple, just to name one company, is all over this. I mean, they need to make sure that supply chain problem is solved for them for all of their products. But it is, you're exactly right about that people may not quite understand how this is going to benefit them. But I will tell you, I think they're going to see it pretty quickly. And the price of gas is a good example. Right now, if OPEC, which includes Russia, makes a determination to either squeeze or open its supply chain, that geopolitical decision has an impact on how much gas prices are. When you get rid of that equation, because clean energy is going to be a stable price, you can start to plan for how much it's going to be. You're not subject to these massive swings in the price of gas, which freaks everybody out. People are going to see that sooner rather than later, and they're going to see it in home energy prices, some reductions there. They're going to see it in more stable energy prices for their vehicles. You're going to see greater public transportation options. You're going to see these benefits across the board, and you're going to see it probably within 2 years.
People would say, though, I cannot afford an electric car. There are a lot of people who cannot afford an electric car right now. Now, obviously, the price of renewable energy, wind and solar, has gone down so much that in many respects, it's as cheap, if not cheaper in most respects, than fossil fuels now, most fossil fuels. Are we going to see the same thing kind of happen with EVs, where they become as cheap as internal combustion engines, and then added on top of that the fact that you don't have to put gas in your car over the course of 10 years. So if you own your car for 10 years, you're saving lots of money. Are we heading there anytime soon?
We're actually almost already there. There are at least, and I can tell you, again, I've had discussions with 3 of the world leaders who are racing to get to a point where as quickly as they can, sometimes some of them within 5 years, that the only thing they're making are electric vehicles. And once that happens, and you've got the biggest car companies on earth all competing with each other, the prices are going to come down like crazy.
Yeah.
And so they'll be within reach of everybody. And then you'll start to see used cars become available. They'll start to rotate out. So yes, it's true. Right now, prices are pretty high for an electric vehicle, for an average consumer, but they're coming down fast. And this is just going to make it come down even faster. So you're going to start to see used cars and new cars start to compete across the board.
And, I don't really like to get into the politics of it, but I know people are probably wondering, of course, this is a bill that is favorable for the Democrats. This is something that Biden promised that he would pass. So this is a win. But how much of a win is it really if it doesn't actually impact people in the short term, being that the midterms are coming up? And, people are not going to probably see too much impact even before 2024, perhaps. Maybe they'll start to see it.
Yeah, I would argue that's not really the case. And so people will start to see some impact sooner rather than later. On some of the other aspects of this bill, like the ability to negotiate over prescription drug prices, it can almost immediately start to reduce healthcare costs.
Yeah.
People will see that.
I was looking at it with my climate hat on. I have to take my climate hat off for a second.
But even with the climate hat, the combination of what the Department of Energy is doing with its infrastructure, they're spending up to $100 billion in communities all across America right now, transforming cities and towns and communities toward clean energy infrastructure. They're building out the infrastructure right now.
Yeah,
they're doing that right now. When this new bill becomes law, that's exponentially larger, some of that money will start to flow right away, and it will trigger investments that will translate to jobs. It's not going to happen by the midterms, of course. I mean, that's a few months away, but it's going to happen pretty quickly. I mean, once this
yeah. See, you've worked in government on and off throughout your career. I've never worked in government, so I don't know how this stuff works. There was something else that I wanted to bring up, and transmission. Okay, so it's wonderful to have everybody switching over to an EV, but all of a sudden now your electricity demand goes through the roof, and we do not have the transmission and distribution that we need for that. So is it the first infrastructure bill that Biden passed? Is that the one that is going to help to get our transmission, our electricity transmission distribution up to snuff so it can handle all this extra electricity? Because if we're going to electrify everything, and we're not using gas and oil as much anymore, that's an inhibiting factor until that infrastructure is built out.
It is there, but this could get complicated quickly. And if Leah Stokes and I were on this call, we'd be having an interesting policy discussion. But there are three things that have. This is the third and sort of the third big piece of the puzzle. Two other things have happened way back when Joe Biden was vice president and President Obama was they had an Economic Recovery Act, and there was a big bet on batteries and a big bet on decentralizing the electric power grid. That is now coming to fruition. So battery technology is better. The energy grid is able to handle things in a more decentralized fashion right now. Then the infrastructure bill came along, and that helped communities make those connections. And now you've got the big 800-pound climate and clean energy bill that's passed. That's gonna connect all those things. So yes, transmission used to be a significant problem, but similar to the way the World Wide Web went from being connected through all these universities to becoming this ubiquitous network all across the country with everybody having access to it, the same thing is going to happen in the clean energy revolution, including transmission problems, a decentralized grid, everybody having the ability to benefit from this in every corner of America. All of that's happening right now. And then that's, again, why this bill is so historic and important.
And right next to you now, I'm just showing the history, which is, you go back to 1988 at when, it was the headline, the front page of the New York Times. It's hard to make the front page of the New York Times in 1988, but this did. And climate folks, environmentalists and everyday people who are concerned about climate have been fighting for this for so many years. And it's really funny because when I look at Twitter, a lot of the people that have really been involved in climate, they don't even know how to celebrate anymore. They don't even know what a victory feels like.
Yeah, they became so accustomed to failure,
desensitized but it is interesting to see because this is such a big moment and it's all happening like that. I mean, we go from one day where you think we're headed towards 4 degrees Celsius of warming, and to the next day where we have a legitimate chance of limiting warming below 2 degrees Celsius, which is, kind of a critical threshold, at least scientists are saying. So it's a big, yeah. And I think people always bring up the point, well, it doesn't matter what the United States does. China's so big, India's so big. But the point of it is that we're investing all this money now. China's going to want to beat us. So they're going to invest a ton of money. and so on and so forth. So this kind of all of a sudden makes the increase in renewable energy and the increase in combating climate change move exponentially fast.
It does. And while there is there's obviously some merit to that question, like, isn't China the largest emitter? Yes, they are. But when you have the three largest players in terms of emissions all starting to compete with each other on clean energy technology, clean tech, clean energy aspects across all the industries, which is what's now starting to happen and accelerate in the United States, China, and India as well. So don't forget India, because its population is about to outstrip that's the ball game right there. That's most of the emissions. That's more than 50% of the emissions. And you want all three of those for their own national interests competing to reduce emissions, then we can solve this problem. And that's the point. We still have a little bit of time to solve this problem, but we need big moves like we're seeing literally today in the United States Congress.
I'm not an economist here, but this is what you're talking about is just this huge macro scale capitalism. All these countries competing to own the future of energy, and that actually somehow capitalism caused climate change, and somehow capitalism may have a chance of solving climate change. Is that not irony?
Well, it not only is yes, it is irony, but what's interesting is that a lot of those same libertarian capitalists who are interested in the one side of the equation, I'll make a prediction: 15 years from now, they'll be taking credit for the clean energy revolution and the capitalism in the market that have been created out of this. You watch. That's my prediction. 15 years.
I'm going to leave the politics to you. Jeff, listen, we've run out of time. You're a busy man. You have other stuff to do, but I'm glad I got a chance to see you. It's been a while since we've seen each other.
Yeah, this is fun.
Yeah, Jeff, thanks a lot. Jeff Nesbit, founder of Climate Nexus. And folks, thank you for watching here on WFLA Now. I am doing climate stuff all the time here on Channel 8, News Channel 8, WFLA Now as well. So if you have a climate question or you have a climate topic that you'd like me to cover, please send it to me. You can send it to weather@WFLA.com. Again, weather@WFLA.com. And again, right now, the House of Representatives debating a bill, which is the Inflation Reduction Act, which has a huge, its largest part of it actually is funding climate change, which is being debated now. It'll be voted on, I think, later today or tonight, and then possibly signed as early as next week by President Joe Biden. So thank you again for joining me, and we will see you again soon on WFLA Now.